Hello, everybody. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. We're delighted to welcome you back for another episode of Disabling Bias. So thank you, everyone who is joining us to listen in today. So as mentioned, this is Disabling Bias. My name is Kim, and I am PwC's Inclusion and Enablement Services Lead. And I'm delighted to be the host of our fourth episode. And we're joined by three fabulous guests today, who I'll let introduce themselves in a bit. But I'm joined by Marco Amitrano, Abigail Agyei, and Diane Lightfoot. And Disabling Bias is our series to talk about a range of issues that affect the disabled and neurodivergent communities. And we do take that social model approach and ask, how can we disable the barriers and the bias and enable the people? So today we're here to talk about the role of business leaders in enabling inclusion and asking questions such as, what role should leaders play? How can they help shape their organization's approach? What practical tips can they adopt? And what do people want to hear from their leaders? What are they looking for? So let's get started. Let's crack on. I'm going to ask each of my guests now to say hello, say their name and what they do in turn. And I'm delighted to start with you, Marco.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, and thank you everybody for dedicating important time to such an important topic. I'm Marco Amitrano. I am the PwC UK Managing Partner and Head of Clients and Markets, and I'm also aligned with that role, the board sponsor, if you like, the executive board sponsor here for what we call our enablement strategy, which incorporates all of what we're talking about today.
Thanks so much, Marco, and thank you for your support and for joining us today. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Abigail.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. So my name's Abigail Agyei. Oh, can you hear me?
We're all good, yes.
Okay, great, brilliant. Getting used to this. So my name is Abigail Agyei. I'm a policy advisor, currently working in the Department of Health and Social Care, and I have over 9 years experience working with marginalised and underrepresented communities and running staff networks within the civil service as well. So I'm really passionate about intersectional identity and supporting people when it comes to neurodiversity, as well as someone who has ADHD and dyspraxia myself. So yeah, really happy to be here and engage in a conversation today.
Thanks so much, Abigail. I mean, neurodiversity is a topic that comes up lots on these sessions, so it's really great to have you here. And Diane, over to you.
Thank you, Kim, and indeed, happy Wednesday. Thank you for having me. I'm Diane Lightfoot, and I'm CEO of Business Disability Forum, and we are a not-for-profit membership organisation working with coming up to 600 organisations across the private, public and voluntary sectors, and we're very pleased that PwC is one of our partners. So thank you for asking me to be here.
Wonderful. So thank you to all three of you for joining for the conversation today. Let's get into it. I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So our first kind of topic, question, is all about how business leaders can get involved and how they can start having conversations about enablement and disability inclusion. So Marco, I've got a question for you to kick us off. Why, as a leader, are you encouraging more conversations on this topic?
Yeah. Conversations, Kim, thank you. They're important, aren't they, to all aspects of challenges, responsibilities in the workplace today. I think for me, the conversations are about two things, principally. Firstly, driving real awareness and change, particularly in a big organization. And secondly, role modeling, actually, that it's important to talk about these things. It's what helps everybody, those affected and those who can have an impact without even realising it. So they're the two main reasons for it. And at PwC, as you know, Kim, that's the core sort of start point for any element of our enablement strategy, is to make sure that there's a light shone on things and people have conversations about them. As the board sponsor for that here, I'm driving those conversations, but I'm at the start, but I'm seeing other people pick up on them. Three things that we've done here recently. One is our head of digital enablement, Denise Wood, and I had a conversation that was videoed and shared with the whole firm. That picked up on some really important things, like how we structure documentation in a way that works, for everybody, so that the use of read aloud software, screen readers, etc., and how we're using, including legends and graphical data to support colour deficiency, for example. So what can seem like very small things that people might not even notice, but they're an important part of our strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conclusion. I've also had a conversation, actually reverse mentor of mine, Gemma Wood, which I think has gone externally actually on LinkedIn so people can see, where Gemma and I talked about, actually how difficult it can feel to have those conversations at times for the person with the disability, but also for the person who wants to try and help. There's a lot of natural fear around having a conversation, and if I make a mistake, what does that mean? Can I get myself into trouble? Am I going to offend somebody? So again, showcasing that conversation and what flows from that conversation was really important, and it was very well received. And the third thing, we're making videos of people again who have disability and are affected, to talk about the importance of giving additional time and space to speak. For example, for someone with a stutter or a speech impediment. So actually they have no fear, and people are really creating the room to get the best out of them and everybody in the team. So, huge impact of just having conversations and where they can take it.
Absolutely. And thank you for those reflections. I think kind of picking up on what you said around really shining a light on those practical tips, we know all our people internally are finding so helpful, but I want to kind of pick up on what you said around that fear factor and how it can actually feel to have these discussions, and actually bring Diane and Abigail in, because Diane, in your role as CEO of Business Disability Forum, you must talk to an awful lot of leaders about this. From your experience, how do leaders feel about having these sorts of conversations?
Well, firstly, I would totally agree with the importance of senior leadership. I mean, we see time and time again how important it is in setting the tone, what matters around here. So it is the impact of senior leaders actually talking about disability. I like to say usualizing the conversation, because normal is a very loaded word, is so important. But of course, that big impact comes with such an amplified sense of what if I get it wrong? And we find that senior leaders are so worried about having this real visible platform and then maybe saying the wrong thing. So we provide lots of support and guidance to them, the language to use. And I think really understanding that even really senior people can have that real fear is so important. The other thing that I often see when I talk about sharing personal stories, there can often be this really unhelpful hierarchy, or I sometimes refer to it as a kind of top trumps about disability. So this sort of idea that my experience, whatever it is, doesn't count. And I hosted a breakfast for some senior leaders back in April, and we were talking about sharing personal stories, and kind of people didn't seem to have any. They seemed to feel they didn't have them themselves. So I said that bit about the top trumps. And I then said, I share my own personal experience of having long-term depression, and also having a form of what's technically a blood cancer. See, even I saying this, say technically, right? Still making an excuse for it, even giving this anecdote. And I said, well, I don't think they massively affect me at work, but I talk about it because people have told me it makes them feel safer to then talk about their condition and what they need. And as soon as I said this, it was like kind of an I'm Spartacus moment. And we went around the table and people were saying, oh, well, I've got this condition and I'm losing my sight and I'm losing my hearing and I had 2 heart attacks last year. And suddenly there was this sort of permission to say, it doesn't have to be whatever you think in your head counts. I'm doing air quotes, which is kind of lost on LinkedIn audio. It's all valid. It's all part of sharing humanity and a human experience and difference. And that's all really, really important.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think we've all got skin in the game, really, haven't we? I mean, it's only recently that when I talk, I've started sharing that I identify as neurodivergent, and it's not really a conversation I've had much. And I'm not a leader by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for all of us, we can start recognizing whether we have a connection or not. It might be in our friends and family, and it's something that touches us all. So, I mean, Abigail, in your view, and kind of as a network leader and champion, but also someone kind of working with leadership, what do you think? What do you want to see from leaders on this in terms of how they engage?
Yeah, happy to come in. And I have to say, first of all, Kim, I think you definitely are a leader. You might not see yourself as a senior leader, but just I think hosting these sessions, you do a brilliant job and are definitely a leader and should see yourself as such. But in terms of what I'm always working to do and encouraging with senior leaders and organizations, I think it's really important to look at that data and really assess that kind of the demographic and understand the makeup of your organizations. So really making sure that the time is being taken to do that, understand the needs and the diversity of what they're basically telling you. So utilize those staff surveys, whatever equivalents you do kind of have, to understand people's experiences in the organization, and then really work to commit based on that information that you're being given, clear goals, be kind of honest and transparent about how long it may take. I think people really do appreciate that and understand that it's not easy kind of dealing with things of this magnitude and making change. But I think if you can be transparent and commit to goals and utilize the staff networks and people that you have to help you do that, but make sure you're kind of not leaning on them to do all the work, so being clear that you're kind of leading on taking that charge, but really want to use their support and insight. I think that's really important. And I think especially a lot of the time from the recruitment point of view, from right from the beginning, I think it's really important to make sure you're kind of creating those inclusive recruiting and hiring processes. So really thinking about that, making sure right from the beginning you're asking staff and people who are applying for roles kind of the right questions and how you can accommodate them, and getting that feedback, getting that continuous feedback of how those processes are, and really kind of reviewing all parts of processes to think, is this really needed? What is the intention of how we're going about doing things? I think that's some of the things, really taking the time to understand, talk and listen to staff, be compassionate and be honest and transparent about the journey. And often it is a marathon, but kind of really commit to doing that work and being honest about it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you kind of said honest, and I think that's just so key here. And it kind of taps into that having the conversation piece as well, whether it's honesty about our own level of comfort and experience in kicking that off, or whether it's honesty about us as an organization and how we're doing. But obviously, you just shared kind of so many areas that this touches on, and like there's heaps that leaders could be looking at. I think, Diane, from your kind of experience, again, sort of the work that you do, and how Business Disability Forum brings that business and disability elements together, what should leaders be paying attention to, right? Like there's so much in this. What are you kind of seeing at the moment in terms of important trends and things to be tapping into?
Well, first of all, I love that word intentional that Abigail used. I think that is really, really important. And I'm really pleased to see, so I've been at BDF for 6.5 years, and I'm really pleased to see more recently a much greater appreciation of the need and the benefits of having a truly diverse workforce, and the need to recruit diversely as well as to retain people. And that is partly, of course, driven by skills shortages, but for whatever reason, it's really good people are thinking that. So thinking about the end-to-end accessibility of recruitment processes is really, really important. The other thing that we are seeing a lot of is data, how to encourage people to tell you that they have a condition, share a disability. And we've been doing a lot of work on data and data reporting, and what that looks like in a really meaningful way. So not just counting numbers of disabled people, but actually what is the quality of the experience like in terms of engagement, in terms of progression, in terms of job satisfaction, all those things, not just kind of numbers. And that whole piece that underpins it all, I think, is about supporting everyone to thrive. And so often that is about workplace adjustments, which I'm sure your listeners will be very familiar with. And I wanted to share with you just a few findings, only a few, because it's a huge report that came out of our great big workplace adjustment survey that we launched. We launched the report last month. And there was some really interesting stuff. There was some good news. So compared with when we last run the survey in 2018 to 19, managers said that they were a lot more confident in talking about disability. In fact, 64% said they were very confident, which was brilliant. I know, that's amazing. But their experience doesn't necessarily chime with the experience of disabled employees. So we saw some really worrying things, like only 10% of people said it was easy to get the adjustments they needed. processes aren't clear. It still takes a long time. 1 in 8 people were waiting over a year. And there was also some really interesting stuff about what we are calling everywhere adjustments. I should really give a shout out to my colleague Angela Matthews, who is the brains behind all of this. And the idea really that you can remove barriers for somebody in their immediate place of work, their discrete workstation or setup or whatever it is, but actually thinking more broadly about access to other opportunities, maybe other physical parts of the building, or things like development or career opportunities and all those sorts of things. So there's some really interesting things kind of coming out of that, I think. And the whole report is available on our website, I should say.
Good shout out.
Thank you very much. So leaders really need to be paying attention to the perception gap, something we see a lot, how they imagine it feels to ask for an adjustment or share a difference, and how it actually feels if you're the person that needs to do that. Really making sure there is practical support. So if someone actually does ask for an adjustment and talks to their manager, that it's then really, really clear how to go and get it. And that sounds so obvious, but so often it's really confusing, convoluted processes that take a long time. And so often, actually, that thing we were saying about the conversation, the manager is the key. So we ask things about, for example, adjustments passports within organizations and all sorts of things. But people said, actually, what's really important is that I have a great relationship with my line manager who wants to support me and has that human conversation. And we see a lot about kind of, when it works, it's about trust. And I always say I want to move people from why to why not, because sometimes, you know, I hear quite a lot, noise cancelling headphones is the classic, that people say, well, if I give them to this person, everyone will want them. Well, really? Most people, practically nobody, asks for stuff they don't actually need. And if everyone asks for it, it probably tells you something about your working environment that you need to fix. So I think really it's about changing the narrative from senior leadership down, that this isn't about doing anyone a favour or sort of special treatment. It's just about enabling everyone to thrive.
I mean, lovely. That's why we call our internal campaign Enabling Everyone Happily Enough. But some of the things you're saying, Diane, really put me in mind of the conversation that you had with Gemma Wood, Marco, when you were talking about, you know, how we can let each other know how we work best, and thinking about those barriers that can be removed. And I think this is probably like such a pressing issue at a workforce level for our clients, thinking about the work that we do at PwC. And I'm just curious to kind of, in the conversations that you're having, kind of, are you seeing any themes around inclusion come through from our clients?
Yeah, we look always, and it's the bigger picture, our client. When you're a big organisation and a big employer and have a big workforce, as we do, 25,000 plus people in the UK alone, you know, we've been in for a number of years now. The questions that I get asked and our chairman gets asked, you know, as we see clients, you know, they used to be about some aspect of our services, or popularity of our services, or, you know, what we're doing for who, what the themes in business coming over the horizon are. And while all those, of course, are still there, a bigger proportion of the conversation in the last 5 years, say, has been, what are you doing about these sort of social issues, inclusion, diversity, other, you know, how are you responding to Black Lives Matter? What are you doing about hybrid working? How are you supporting, you know, the efforts in relation to, you know, supporting people coming in from Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we're just seen as a big beacon in the employment world, and people want to know what we're doing. And, you know, enablement, helping people with disability, addressing all these things in the workplace, has been an increasing part of those questions, that conversation. And actually, I'd say it anchors back to people. We all need everyone to be at their best, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, if we want to believe we're a high performance organisation, a high performance environment, we need everybody to be at their best, particularly given the challenges that business organisations, our economy has. So it's a much more natural extension of that. And that's what Gemma and I focused on, was, you know, it's a win-win for everybody. Gemma said that herself. Everybody wins if we have this conversation, the organisation wins, the individuals win, because we make sure we're creating conditions for people to thrive and be at their best.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely couldn't put it better myself. It's just why, like Diane was saying, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do this? It just enables everybody to kind of have that career that they want, to succeed and to give their best for kind of the work that they're doing. So, I mean, Abigail, I'd love to kind of hear your views, particularly again as kind of that network leader and thinking about kind of how leaders might look internally for insights as well as considering all these kind of research and market trends that exist.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Marco was saying, and I think it really does go back to utilizing that information that your staff are giving you. So when there is those opportunities and making sure they're regularly, so not just that kind of, I'm not sure exactly how PwC does it, but like kind of that big people staff survey, but making sure that those regular check-in points throughout the year, those kind of pulse surveys to really check the temperature, has things improved from those last conversations, utilize those safe spaces where people feel comfortable to have those conversations with the staff networks, making sure you are engaging what are the staff networks hearing in those spaces, what do they want to see improvements of, how making sure that senior leaders are kind of engaging with those staff networks to regularly let people know kind of the improvements that are happening and how you want to work together. I think that's really important in terms of that internal level. And yeah, utilizing amazing organizations like Diane's with Business Disability Forum, the places that do have those kind of regular checkpoints and work that's happening. I think it's like really important to do that. So yeah, and enable those staff networks as well to continue to support the staff as well through resource. And I think that's always important as well. So that's why I say a lot of the time, a lot of kind of the answers and support is within the staff and the information they're giving you of what they want to see and the help they need.
Absolutely. I think it's good to kind of have that awareness. There are resources out there, especially at the moment. There's literally heaps that we can leverage and draw on externally, but some of the best kind of information will be from our people and kind of hearing their stories and experiences. And on that, I'd kind of like to stay with you, Abigail, and talk a bit about the kind of experiences of intersectionality. And because when we were chatting before kind of coming onto the session, you were letting us know about the work that you do, particularly for kind of more marginalized communities around neurodiversity. And often people might be kind of trying to advocate to make change while managing their own barriers and experiences. So my question really is kind of given your experiences and the role that you play, how can leaders take that kind of balancing act that individuals are having to play into account? What practically can they do to support?
I'd say I think it's really important to create a comfortable, safe space for staff to kind of explore the support they need. I'm often say, especially when you're looking at intersectionality and multiple social identities that overlap in, sometimes people might not kind of have the language. I know I got my ADHD and dyspraxia um sorry, because I got my diagnosis much later in life, and initially there was probably some internalized ableism even when I did get that, because you're, especially when I'm working in environments where it wasn't necessarily the most diverse, I'm already kind of a Black younger woman working in an environment, it felt like kind of another barrier. And initially there was kind of, yeah, that internalized ableism of not really wanting to explore this. Oh, this could be something that could hinder me. So sometimes, a lot of the time, you need that comfortable, safe environment to have these conversations, because sometimes people don't have the language, they don't know the additional support they need. But if they can work with managers to kind of get that help, I think it's really important. So I think it's so important to create those environments, to really make sure, as I've said, that there is that kind of resource and support is being talked about in terms of adjustments. And I think that's really important. Something I do with teams and people I manage is I have like a little personal preference form when I have new people join the team, just so I can share like the conditions I like to work in, the how I like to receive feedback. I share that with them and ask them to share it with me. That's kind of a good starting point sometimes to get people to lay out the kind of support that they need. And I think it is sometimes important just at an early point to kind of create that environment so it doesn't feel kind of scary. And I think it is really important for managers as well to kind of lean in and take that initiative to make sure that they're kind of getting an understanding. If someone's felt safe enough or comfortable enough to say that I kind of need this further support, really lean in on making sure you're kind of looking at the support that you can get them, because as everyone said, it can kind of feel like a minefield trying to really work out the support you need and where to go. So yeah, that's some of the things I'd say. Make sure that's that safe environment. Let them know that there's support beyond you as well. If within that environment it's not comfortable, there's staff networks, there's other places they can lean in, but make sure that there is really that you're kind of leaning in as a manager to provide that support.
Yeah, I love that practical tip around the kind of the preferences form that you shared. It's something really
Yeah,
tangible, but it's kind of both ways as well.
exactly.
And I
And I'm always
think,
happy to share that
yeah,
form that I have. So
oh,
yeah,
no.
happy to
Awesome.
pass it on.
And I think something that we tell our people, or at least try and kind of constantly sort of support, reinforce, and encourage, is that they don't have to have all the answers. And
Exactly.
it's really about, it might be a conversation or a collaboration to figure out what works. So, and recognizing that people might be on that journey too, like as you say, a later in life diagnosis, if they have a diagnosis at all. So a lot to navigate. I think kind of sharing practical tips like you've just done to kind of say, this is something tangible you can do. And this is a way that as a leader, you could be proactive with your teams and filter that through. I think hopefully that's really kind of
Yeah.
helped. So
Yeah, because you
um,
can always have the
yeah.
language, but just know that they need some kind of support. So yeah, where you can support them and lead them in that direction, it's always important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of have similar sort of questions to kind of bring Marco and Diane in, really, kind of around these practical tips and in your experience, what you found helpful. So, Marco, thinking about kind of your experiences and the conversations you've been having internally recently and the videos that you've done, what tip or kind of practical advice might you want to give to other executive allies and sponsors? What's helped you kind of engage?
Well, firstly, and I think it's probably been alluded to, having real executive engagement, not just something light touch or superficial. Yeah,
Hmm.
people spot, don't they? Either you are, whether it's an initiative that looks like it really is meaningful to the organisation or not. So the first thing is, make sure it is properly sponsored, properly real, and then I think there's a consistency down your ways. The message to message, video to video, meeting to meeting, there's evidence of consistency in the message and how it's landing, and therefore practical things really happening. There's a role that the set piece videos have to play, but the follow up that lands the
Mm.
message through conversations that is really key. That's what people look for, and that's what they notice. They'll watch a video or listen to something for and then go and look for it. And if they don't find it, then there's a question to the authenticity.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think just to kind of like bring out like definitely the sorry, I've got a message just come through that distracted me, to be perfectly transparent. I think the authenticity that you mentioned there and kind of actually making sure that you're following up, it's kind of a reiterated message. It's not a one and done or a one off or I've got to say this and then we're moving on to the next thing, but it's actually kind of that drumbeat that's coming through. I know that we've had such a kind of rich conversation that we're very close to the end, but Diane, I still want to give you the chance, if you could give leaders any one tip to help remove barriers, what would that be?
I'd say practice what you preach. So what you say is really important. What you do is equally important. And talking again about our survey, we asked about career progression and lots of people said, I don't think I could do the job my boss does because they never have a break, they never do this. As somebody said, I just want to see my boss have a sandwich, just have a sandwich. So remember that people will see what you do as well as listen to what you say.
Thank you. I think that's kind of actually such a powerful and clear message on which to come to a close, because we sadly only have these sessions in for half an hour and the conversation just goes so quickly. We always cover so much ground. But I want to thank all three of you, Marco, Abigail and Diane, for joining to discuss, to share your insights and experiences with everyone listening today. I want to thank all the people that have joined to listen, and I hope that you found this half an hour interesting, that you've gleaned some tips that you can take away. And if you've missed some, the good news is we've recorded it. So it will be shared on PwC UK's YouTube channel. For anybody who's joining us internally, we'll make sure to communicate it on our internal channels too. And you can also find all our previous episodes on YouTube as well, where we've been discussing things like the effectiveness of campaigns and advocacy, hidden disabilities, and the intersectionality of neurodiversity. So it remains to me to say goodbye, to thank everybody for joining, and to look out for our next episode, which will be in September. I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.